Have you ever wondered why some women choose to live alone? No boyfriend, no romantic partner, and not even searching for one. Most people assume it's loneliness. Others whisper that it must be heartbreak, rejection, or just giving up. But the truth is far deeper, far more unsettling. It's something society rarely wants to face. A woman who lives alone by choice isn't missing something. She's mastering something. And before we go deeper, stay with me until the end of this video, because I'll share a final insight, one that may shift how you see solitude forever. A truth most people won't admit, but once you hear it, you can't unhear it. When a woman steps into solitude without fear, she's not retreating from the world. She's stepping into herself. She's not falling apart. She's finally coming together. That kind of woman doesn't crave attention. She values peace. She doesn't chase someone to complete her. She already feels whole. And that, right there, is the part that shakes the foundation of how we've been conditioned to see women. Because a woman who doesn't need a man to feel valid becomes dangerous, not in a violent way, but in a quiet, soul-shaking way. She disrupts the game. She stops asking for love and starts choosing it. She's not here to be saved. She's already done the saving. For herself. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." And maybe that's why this woman makes people uncomfortable. She is the reflection of something unresolved. In her silence, in her wholeness, in her calm, she becomes a mirror. Not everyone is ready to look into that. She's not cold. She just stopped burning for people who never cared to feel her fire. She doesn't hate men. She simply won't shrink anymore just to be held. And no, she's not bitter. She's healed. But healing doesn't make you soft. It makes you clear. Clear on what matters. Clear on who stays. Clear on who you'll never betray again. Especially yourself. The silence around her isn't empty. It's a sanctuary. People say she's distant, cold, or hard to connect with, but they never stop to ask what she's actually protecting. She's not shutting the world out. She's preserving something sacred, herself. Carl Jung said that what we don't face in ourselves, we project onto others. And maybe that's why people project so much confusion, judgment, even fear onto a woman who lives alone, because she represents a choice they don't have the courage to make. She isn't searching for distractions. She's done trying to fill voids with noise, crowds, or superficial connections. She's not scrolling for someone to talk to at 2 a.m. or posting to be seen. She's learned the difference between visibility and value. Inside her, there was a quiet collapse. Not dramatic, not loud, just a slow breaking apart of everything she used to chase. Love, validation, the need to be enough. And in that collapse, she found something unshakable. She didn't become bitter. She became rooted. Rooted in truth, in boundaries, in clarity. The kind that doesn't scream, but changes everything. You see, when a woman lives alone, it doesn't mean she's given up on love. It means she's given up on settling. She still wants to be held, but she won't lose herself for it. She still longs to be chosen, but not at the cost of shrinking her soul. And that makes her rare, because in a world full of women taught to bend, to give, to adapt just to be loved, she's chosen to stand. And that stand, that clarity, scares people, especially those who still love from a place of need instead of a place of wholeness, because she's not trying to be completed. She's already become. She remembers the nights she cried in silence, The days she questioned her worth because someone didn't call back. She's begged for the bare minimum before and hated herself for it. But one day, something cracked, and that crack wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The beginning of a woman who doesn't chase, doesn't cling, and doesn't apologize for her solitude. A woman who doesn't need a witness to feel real. Now, she doesn't confuse silence with absence. She knows it's space for truth to emerge. She doesn't rush into conversations just to avoid the discomfort of her own company. She's made peace with it. And that peace, that inner calm, makes her magnetic in a way that makeup and filters never could. This kind of woman becomes a mirror, and not everyone is ready to see what they reflect in her presence. She no longer needs to perform softness to be seen as lovable. She doesn't dilute her thoughts to make them more digestible. She's tired of sugarcoating her truth just to be less intimidating, because somewhere along the way, she realized if being fully herself scares someone off, that person was never meant to stay. The woman who lives alone has faced what many run from, her own shadow. She's looked into the quiet spaces of herself, the abandoned places, the heartbreaks that didn't scream but quietly stayed, shaping her. She's been the version of herself that said yes when she meant no. The one who kept showing up for people who wouldn't even notice if she disappeared. But those days are over. Now, she doesn't tolerate emotional crumbs. She doesn't wait around for someone to figure it out. She doesn't flirt with potential or stay just because there were good moments in between the damage. She understands something most people don't. Emotional safety is not negotiable. And because she's tasted the bitterness of betrayal, her standards are no longer flexible. Not because she's harsh, but because she's healed. That's the thing most don't get. Healing doesn't always make you warmer. Sometimes it makes you sharper. And sharp women are often mistaken for difficult ones. But this woman, she's not difficult. She's discerning. She doesn't mistake attention for affection. She doesn't confuse intensity with intimacy. She sees through the charming distractions, the emotional performances, the masked insecurity dressed as masculinity. She doesn't fall for it anymore, not because she's closed off, but because she's finally tuned in. She's learned to listen, not just to what someone says, but to what their silence screams. She picks up on energy, intention, and tone. Her intuition isn't something she doubts now. It's something she trusts. That inner knowing, once buried under layers of conditioning and self-doubt, now guides her every decision. And in that alignment, in that deep, unapologetic clarity, she finds power. A quiet power. The kind that doesn't raise its voice to be heard. The kind that walks away without slamming doors. The kind that no longer waits for anyone to understand her value. Because she knows it now. She is no longer trying to prove her worth in a world that keeps demanding she shrink. She doesn't rush anymore. Not in decisions, not in love, not in proving anything to anyone. Her pace is intentional, unshaken by the noise around her. While the world scrolls, taps, races to be seen, she chooses to feel. That difference may not be obvious to everyone, but for those who sense it, it changes everything. She remembers when silence used to scare her, when being alone felt like punishment. But now it's her sanctuary, a sacred space she won't let just anyone into. She's not hiding. She's selective. She's not closed. She's intentional. There's a difference, and that difference is what makes her magnetic. Men who once thrived on female insecurity find themselves confused around her. The usual tactics, the delayed responses, the vague answers, the emotional push-pull, none of it lands anymore. Because this woman doesn't chase clarity. She embodies it. And clarity has a frequency. You either meet it, or you fade out. And here's the part most people won't say out loud. A woman like this changes the room without saying a word. Not because she demands attention, but because she doesn't. Her stillness carries weight. Her presence speaks louder than performance ever could. You can feel her story before she even tells it. Not because she overshares, but because her eyes don't lie. She's seen too much, lost too much, gave too much, until she learned that her love is not a currency to be bartered. It's a frequency. You either rise to meet it or you're not meant to hold it. She knows she's misunderstood, and strangely, she's okay with that. She doesn't need to be explained, liked, or approved. Her energy no longer negotiates, and that unsettles people. Because when a woman no longer dances for approval, she becomes a mirror, and most people aren't ready to see what's in that reflection. So if something in you stirs when you hear her story, if a quiet part of your heart whispers, "I know this feeling," then maybe this space was always meant to find you. Not to convince you, but to remind you that there is another way, that you are not broken, that maybe your silence isn't emptiness. It's the beginning of remembering who you really are. Some stories aren't meant to entertain. They're meant to awaken. And when one does, you'll know it. Not because you're told, but because you feel it. Somewhere deep. And when something resonates that deeply, well, you don't just watch and move on. You stay. You listen again. You carry it with you. She doesn't get excited by potential anymore. She looks for patterns, for energy, for depth. She doesn't ask, "What could this become?" She asks, "What does this already show me?" Because experience has taught her that potential is a beautiful lie people hide behind when they're not ready to be real. This woman doesn't chase chemistry. She watches for consistency. She doesn't get pulled in by pretty words, grand gestures, or what-ifs. She knows how to feel, but she also knows how to pause, to observe, to listen to the space between the words, because that's where the truth often hides. She used to confuse intensity with connection. Now, she understands that chaos isn't passion. It's just chaos. And love that feels like survival isn't love. It's trauma. That realization didn't come from books or theory. It came from living through the emotional storm and realizing the calm was always the goal. When a woman has lived through all that and still chooses love, it's not because she's naive. It's because she's brave. Brave enough to love without losing herself. Brave enough to stay soft without being broken. Brave enough to leave even when her heart wants to stay, because her soul is whispering, "You deserve better." And maybe that's what makes her dangerous. Not her independence, not her clarity, but her refusal to compromise her soul just to keep someone else's company. There was a time when she thought being alone was her flaw, a sign that something was wrong with her. But now she sees it differently. Now she knows. The woman who can be alone without being lonely is the woman who chooses from power, not from fear. And here's the secret most never admit. She still longs for love, for arms that feel like home, for eyes that see her completely. But she will not beg. Not anymore. Because begging costs something she's no longer willing to give. Her peace. She would rather wait, rather sit in silence than entertain someone who only wants access, not connection. She's not interested in half-love. She's done with almosts, and almost loved her, almost chose her, almost showed up. That's not love. That's emotional laziness dressed as effort. So she keeps walking, not because she's given up, but because she knows that the kind of love she wants requires her to be whole first, and she's already there. Anyone who joins her now needs to be whole too, not to complete her, but to meet her. And if you've ever felt that tug inside, that whisper that says, "I'm tired of pretending this is enough," then maybe you already carry the same clarity. Maybe you're not broken. Maybe you're just awakening. She's no longer impressed by the beginning. She waits for the middle, the moments after the excitement fades, when truth steps in. She watches how someone shows up when things aren't perfect, when the masks slip, when it's no longer about attraction, but attention, presence, and emotional truth, because she's lived through beginnings that sparkled, only to end in silence. She's been the one who believed too quickly, forgave too fast, and stayed too long. Not anymore. Now, she doesn't romanticize inconsistency. She doesn't excuse absence as space or confusion as depth. She no longer tells herself stories to justify someone else's emotional absence. She reads the signs for what they are, not what she wishes they could mean. She's learned that you can't build intimacy with someone who hides. You can't create safety with someone who disappears when things get real. And most importantly, you can't share your soul with someone who's afraid of their own. So she holds her peace like a shield, not to block love, but to filter it. Because love without self-awareness is just projection. And she's no longer willing to be someone's mirror if they're not willing to see themselves. There was a time when she thought the goal was to be chosen. Now, she knows the truth. The goal is to choose herself so fully that anyone who enters her world feels the weight of that self-worth. She doesn't want a savior. She doesn't need validation. She's not waiting for someone to give her a reason to feel enough, because she's already there. She's enough in her stillness, enough in her solitude, enough in her silence. And the world doesn't always understand that. A woman who doesn't need to be chased, a woman who doesn't seek permission, a woman who doesn't perform pain just to receive comfort. That kind of woman unsettles people because she breaks unspoken rules, the ones that say women should be softer, quieter, more grateful for whatever attention they get. But she's not playing that game anymore. She doesn't shrink for comfort. She doesn't twist herself to be liked. She doesn't carry old versions of herself just to keep people comfortable. She's not unreachable. She just refuses to be touched by hands that aren't clean. She's not bitter. She's sacred. Her time is sacred. Her energy is sacred, and she protects it. Not because she's selfish, but because she's healed. And that healing? It's not loud. It doesn't post quotes or prove points. It simply is. You can feel it in her presence, in how she says little, but everything. In how she doesn't react. She remembers. And from that memory, she chooses wisely. She doesn't ask for closure anymore. Not because she doesn't care, but because she finally understands that some people leave just to avoid facing themselves. Their silence wasn't about her. It was about the parts of them that couldn't meet her depth. Closure, she's learned, isn't always a conversation. Sometimes it's a decision, a moment where she chooses peace over answers, clarity over chaos, and wholeness over waiting. The woman who lives alone didn't get here by accident. She arrived after being left on red, gaslighted, half-loved, and almost chosen. Too many times. And now, she doesn't flinch when someone disappears. She doesn't beg for clarity from people who offered confusion. She doesn't dig through mixed signals looking for meaning, because she's no longer playing in the emotional gray zone. She lives in truth now, and that truth has cost her, but it also saved her. She walks with a different rhythm now. Her time feels expensive, not because she's busy, but because she's aware. Aware of how many days she wasted waiting for someone to choose her back. Aware of how often she explained her heart to people committed to misunderstanding it. Aware of how she once settled for potential when what she needed was presence. She's not interested in proving herself anymore. She doesn't perform to be loved. Love that asks for performance isn't love. It's a stage, and she's walked off it. For good. Now, her love is quiet. Not because it's small, but because it no longer needs an audience. She doesn't post to be seen. She doesn't date to feel wanted. She lives her life fully, not as a performance, but as a practice, a daily practice of self-respect, of protecting her peace, of honoring the woman she fought to become. And here's what no one tells you. This kind of woman isn't hard to love. She's just not easy to fool. She doesn't fall for potential or charm or temporary passion. She needs depth, safety, honesty, and most importantly, presence. She doesn't need you to be perfect. She needs you to be real, because she's not looking for someone to complete her. She's looking for someone to meet her fully, bravely, with eyes that don't flinch when they see her truth. And if you can't, she won't chase. She'll let go, with grace, with love, with no need for revenge or closure, because letting go is no longer her weakness. It's her wisdom. So here it is, the truth we promised from the beginning, the one most people can't handle. A woman who can live alone is not proving that she doesn't need love. She's proving that she knows the difference between love and attachment, that she can hold space for longing and still not betray herself, that she can crave connection, but not at the cost of her soul. And that truth, that power, it terrifies the world, because we've been taught to admire women who give everything, not women who walk away with everything still intact. But here's the paradox. The woman who doesn't need a man is the one a man cannot forget. Not because she withheld love, but because she became love. Quiet, grounded, magnetic, not chasing, just existing in truth. You don't find women like her in the noise. You find her in stillness, in spaces that require silence, in places where you have to rise to meet her, not pull her down to reach you. And maybe the real question isn't whether you're this woman. Maybe the question is, when was the last time you chose yourself over your fear of being alone? If something stirred in you today, a memory, a truth, a shift, don't let it fade. Drop one sentence in the comments that your past self needed to hear. You never know who might read it and feel less alone. And if this story found you at just the right time, maybe that wasn't an accident. If you're ready to go deeper into your own truth, click the playlist on your screen now. We've collected the most soul-shifting videos for women walking this same path. When you're ready to stop chasing love and start becoming it, you'll know where to go.